Hi guys, this is Lorena. Welcome to my channel. I'm an astrologer, and in this video we are going to talk about synastry compatibility, romantic compatibility between partners. I know that today's video is going to be a really exciting one for you guys because it's going to be a very exact guide of what I look for in synastry charts and when I tell people if they're compatible or if they're not. Now, it's really important to note that relational compatibility in astrology does not guarantee real life compatibility. So the way that this works is that when we look at someone's synastry, we can say, yeah, you're probably there's probability to head in a serious relationship here, but we cannot guarantee that those people are going to have a happy relationship because things like character and real life interests are also going to be important in the success of a relationship. So that being said, with astrology, we can tell if two people are going to be drawn to each other, but we cannot guarantee that they're going to get along with each other. Because, one person can be abusive because they've chosen to be so, and the other person could be an empath because their environment and they also chose to become that way. And those relationships don't work because of psychological reasons, not for astrological reasons. But generally, astrology can show us, when you have an attraction for someone, do you have a synastry that really says, you're probably going to get married, or you can have a more solid partnership than this, or is this just a fling that you're feeling because you're hyping yourself up? So keep that in mind. But now to discuss actual compatibility indicators, you have to generate your synastry chart with someone else. And in order to do this, it is recommended that you have both of your birth dates, times, and locations. But in the absence of their birth time and location, you can just use your own full birth data, which is mandatory, and then only use a day chart for their birth chart and put your chart in the middle and then put the other person's chart on the outside. The synastry chart can be read from two directions, so you can put a chart on the inside of the wheel and then a chart on the outside, and then you can switch the views. The person on the inside would be the person that would be influenced by the one on the outside when you read the chart in that way. So that is also important to keep in mind. But the very first compatibility indicator is actually something that you don't need a synastry chart for. It's something that you can tell just by reading at your individual charts, and that is understanding the energy of your Sun, Moon, Venus, and Mars. So what does that mean? Well, the Sun, in a woman's chart, the Sun and Mars will represent the type of man that she wants in her life. Or if it's a woman that is a lesbian or someone pansexual, it would be the energy that they're looking for in a more masculine partner, if they're looking for a more masculine partner. In the charts of men, the Sun and Mars will show how they naturally act in a relationship, or in the charts of people that are more masculine, the Sun and Mars will show how they act in a relationship. The Sun is more so how you act on a normal personality level. The Mars placement is more so your sexual energy and how do you act when it comes to doing something, getting something that you want. So women want a partner that kind of resemble their Sun and Mars, but also in the case of men, they have the Sun and Mars energy explaining how they tend to act in their default way. The next placements are going to be the Moon and Venus. For a woman, the Moon is how she naturally acts when you live with her in the home. So, for example, a woman with the Moon in Leo, she's going to want to entertain you. She's going to be very creative and fun to be around. But a woman with the Moon in Capricorn, she's going to be like a little boss. She's going to be very serious. She will want things to be organized in the home. And so on. And Venus will show how she expresses her sensuality, her sexual energy as well. In the charts of men, the Moon will represent the type of woman that they want to have by their side, the type of woman that they're naturally comfortable with. So a man with the Moon in Aries, for example, he's naturally comfortable around women who are assertive, who are very active, maybe a little bit aggressive, even though they don't want to recognize that. Or if a man has a Moon in Capricorn in his chart, then he will want a woman that is more like a boss, very serious, career oriented. And then we have the men who have moon in Cancer, and then they want a traditional housewife or they want a woman that's very caring and nurturing, and that can provide him with that sense of a nurturing home environment. And then Venus in a man's chart will represent the type of woman that he is sexually attracted to. So the type of woman that he'll naturally lean towards. When you want to analyze the compatibility between two people, you want to understand more so from a psychological standpoint, how do they act in a relationship? How do they act when you live with them? And also, what are they looking for? What are they attracted to? Ideally, you want two people that have the same Venus-Mars connection. So the woman's Venus is the same sign as the man's Mars. Or we have sun-moon connections. The woman's moon is the man's sun. Or, if the man has a particular moon sign in his chart, he wants a woman that depicts those traits. You want to understand the people on a psychological level. Are they meeting their partner's needs or not? Sometimes you don't necessarily need a zodiac sign energy in your chart. You don't need to take off all of your partner's zodiac signs energies to, make sure that you are the ideal partner. But you at least have to have an understanding of that and an acceptance of that. So, for example, if you want to be a full working woman and you want to have a full-blown career and you don't want kids, it's very hard to be with a man who has a moon in Cancer because he wants to have a woman by his side who's more of a family woman. So these are things that you need to understand before looking at the synastry. So knowing yourself and knowing whether you can meet your partner's needs is the very first step towards a compatibility reading. Now, looking at actual aspects in the synastry chart, this is where things get very, very funny. So the very first thing that I look for are any 4th house or 7th house synastry connections. So when you look at your synastry chart, does any of you have planets in the other person's 7th house? Does any of you have planets in the other person's 4th house? The 7th house is a house of partnership and marriage and one-on-one connections, and you want someone by your side that you can view as a partner. Now, it is not mandatory to be with someone who has a personal planet there, but you will find that any sort of placement, even if it's a generational planet or a virtual point that is in your 7th house, could be a positive indicator for your compatibility. The 4th house is also quite a good one to have because the 4th house is the house of home and family. So if you're with someone who has, their Mercury or their Sun in your 4th house, then it means that you naturally see them as someone who's your family member and you will feel more comfortable around them. So that's a general beneficial thing to have as well. Now, we do see in a lot of cases that for married couples, so people who also have long-term relationships, they have at least one placement in each other's 4th house or 7th house. Or sometimes they don't have any, but the other partner, when you switch the synastry chart around and you put the other partner in the middle, there's one partner that has a lot of those 4th house and 7th house connections. So that's how you can recognize that. Another thing is very similar to this, but if you have someone's south node in the other person's 7th house, and implicitly that person's north node in the other partner's 1st house. Now, this is a big indicator for instant, karmic connection, soulmate connection. This is when a partner immediately says, it's like love at first sight. I recognize you from a past life. I want to be with you. Relational compatibility immediately. Now, what happens a lot is, obviously, this is not an energy that is reciprocated. So one partner can have that instinctual remembrance of, yeah, I'm attracted to you. The other person's not. So usually, if you have, let's say, your north node in your partner's 1st house, your partner is going to be the one that recognizes you. So that's usually a positive one because it shows that immediate desire to work on the relationship and to make that relationship successful. Another indicator that we see are going to be conjunctions between planets. People who end up being married and who end up having successful relationships end up having conjunctions between personal planets, even generational planets that are of a positive nature. So they end up having, for example, Mercury Jupiter or Mercury Saturn. when you see conjunctions, these things mean that you guys blend in your energies together. So Mercury conjunct Saturn in the Synastry chart, for example, could say that the Saturn person makes the Mercury person be more attentive to how they speak, to how they think, to how they communicate, how do they plan their life as well. If you have, for example, Jupiter conjunct the Sun in a synastry, that's a very positive one, because the Jupiter person can enrich the Sun's person's life. They can give them a lot of resources and money, and generally they can make their life abundant. This is particularly true if you have conjunctions with the axis points, so the ascendant, IC, descendant, or the midheaven. So if you have a partner's Mercury on the other person's ascendant, that usually means there's good communication in the relationship, and that the ascendant person feels like the Mercury person is very intelligent and they have a lot of intellectual value to gain from that connection. Usually something draws people together, and conjunctions are the things that draw people together the most. So having conjunctions doesn't necessarily show like romantic compatibility, but it shows like partnership compatibility. You have a reason to live together. You have a reason to collaborate. That being said, marriages also see Saturn connections quite a lot, and Saturn connections are usually seen as negative, but in the context of a relationship reading, they can be quite positive. Of course, if you have a Saturn Chiron connection, or a Saturn Lilith, or a Saturn Pluto connection, that's not going to be a good one, because you don't want the other planet to be a bad one as well. Mars can be fine. Mars-Saturn can be fine. But if you have Chiron, Lilith, or Pluto connecting with the other person's Saturn, then that's usually not a compatibility point. Why is Saturn connection good for marriage? Well, Saturn is the planet of maturity. And what happens in a relationship that turns into a marriage? Well, there's growth, there's maturity that happens. You grow together, and you're naturally more inclined to be with the person that you're going to grow with rather than someone that you're going to stay a kid with. So Saturn connections a lot of times can also show maybe challenges in the relationships, but challenges more so in the way of, why are we here together? Why are we here to grow? So for example, if you have a partner Saturn on the other person's descendant, the descendant person learns how to be a more committed partner from the Saturn person, because the descendant is the point of one-on-one relationships and commitment and partnerships. But if one person's Saturn is on another's midheaven, which is the career point, it means that the Saturn partner helps the midheaven partner have a more successful career and achieve their professional goals. From a mentorship standpoint, almost. From a personal planet's perspective, if you have someone who has, for example, Moon-Saturn connection, this can be a little bit difficult because the Moon is also about emotional expression, so you want to make sure that the person's character is good here. But Saturn-Moon, the Saturn person teaches the Moon person to be more emotionally responsible, to question their feelings and how they can be practical about the way that they go in life and the way that they go about their emotional instincts. So, of course, naturally, if you're with a person that is abusive or that has a bad character, you can see how this conjunction may play out in a bad way. But Saturn connections usually tend to be positive from a marriage standpoint, although traditionally Saturn is a malefic. Awesome. So I would say these are the most important indicators to look for in a synastry chart. Naturally, you will find that there's a lot of people on this earth that you're going to have connections like these with. Relational success is based on, first of all, the more connections that you have like these, the more that you're likely to have a successful relationship with. I would say the 4th house, 7th house, synastry is the most important one that usually guarantees there's a relationship happening. But conjunctions are also important, especially conjunctions to the axes. The Saturn one is a strong one for marriage. So the more that you see of these, the more that you know that people are going to be meant to be together. So because there's a lot of people that you're going to have these connections with, it's also important to keep in mind that you have a lot of soulmates on this earth. and that it's important that they also have a similar cultural and background and character as you do, because that will eventually lead to a healthy and successful relationship. It's not just the astrology side of it. Can never say that enough. But yeah, I hope that this video was useful for you. I hope it gave you a sense of what Synastry compatibility is about. Let me know if you have any questions. And for the next video, where we discuss the negative indicators in a Synastry, aka I don't want to say twin flame relationships, because those can maybe turn out into good way, but karmic toxic relationships is the topic of the next video. So I'll see you in that one. Bye-bye.